All right, everyone, welcome back to part two. Tom and I have decided to carry on, and we are going to discuss dreams in the second half, the dream nature of reality, how you can discern that, and how that can help or harm you, depending on your perspective on said situation. Hey, Tom.
Hey,
So, dreams, what would you say about them?
so we've got our personal nightly dreams, and then we have on a bigger scale the dream nature of reality itself. Okay, so let's just start with our nightly dreams and what we can kind of discern or learn from them, the pure essence of them. So, isn't it interesting that in a dream you can have your own thoughts, autonomy, words in your head, and actions that you take. And you're interacting with other dream characters in a dream environment that is all being projected by the same mind, by the same brain. It's all happening internally within you. How is it that what seems to be one consciousness when you're awake, can somehow fragment into the thing that generates the dream, that passes symbolic messages through the dream, that speaks through the dream characters, and yet also at the same time be you experiencing that very thing? That's very interesting. It's almost like a microcosmic reflection of how the infinite creator can be split up amongst us, interacting with each other, and yet we all are still that same reflected candlelight in all the individual mirrors. So that's one interesting aspect of it. And then the other interesting thing is you're in a dream and it's all consciousness, and yet you're not like falling through the non-solid ground.
Hmm.
You actually have to walk using dream feet on a dream ground. So there's some sort of physics that is involved in dreams that generally keeps things solid, that creates the illusion that you're in a world interacting with other physical people, maybe driving in a dream car, something like that. So there's a kind of persistence, memory, solidity in dreams. But the thing is, it's not perfect because so many times I've been in a dream where I became lucid and I try to fly or something like that. And sometimes flying is a struggle. Like you think like you can just apply your willpower and fly, but it's not that easy. Sometimes you have to wait and really kind of reach down within yourself to detach yourself from the dream gravity, right? Or, you're trying to get through a wall and initially you pound on it, it's solid, and only when you put your hands on it and kind of relax into it do you start melting through the wall in a dream. So there's a physics there, but it's not perfect. Okay, now translate that to waking world.
Hmm.
Here we are in this waking world, and what do we have? Okay, well, we have solidity, we have physics. It seems to be the law of the land, seems to be you can't really violate it. And yet, what do we have? We have people that can bend spoons using the power of their minds. We have cases throughout history of spontaneous human levitation, people just lifting off the ground by the power of their minds. Uh, Stories in the East of yogis who can genuinely fly and levitate. I mean, not only in India, but also in China, these esoteric masters who can defy gravity, not to mention aliens and their anti-gravity ships and the ways that they bend physics, right? So it's interesting that we also have physics here in this waking world, but it also is not perfect. There are cases and applications where it can be bent or violated. So, is reality really real in a physical, independent sense? Or is it yet another layer of a dream that's more collective, perhaps? You know? And further, you can go further than that, where in a dream, you can have symbols that are communicated to you from the subconscious
Hmm.
that convey certain things about you, either things that are coming up or certain issues that you're dealing with, like symbolic, like dream symbols. And you can actually look them up in a dream dictionary. And a lot of times, if you use the right dictionary, it'll be correct, it'll be accurate. It'll actually decode what your subconscious or higher mind is trying to communicate to you. Okay, now look at waking reality. Do we get that? Yes, we get synchronicities, we get omens, we get signs sometimes to some people. Not everyone is gets those unless they really look for it, but some people get them so often it's crazy. I've had my share of extremely crazy synchronicities, and after logging so many of them and looking back upon them, the probability of it all just being confirmation bias and just kind of looking what you want to, looking for what you want to see is like zero. It's essentially zero.
Yeah.
That's so what can I conclude from that? That's like two for two. That
Hmm.
reality, waking reality mirrors how dreams operate. You see? And
Oh.
so, yeah, so even in this waking reality, there is a programmed part of it, just how we get physics and mathematics and the way the sun works and gravity and all this kind of stuff. That is all mathematical. That's all encoded. We have that, but then we also have the symbolic synchronicities, omens, and other weird things like paranormal stuff or aliens defying the laws of physics and so on. Yeah, it seems to me that perhaps reality is more of a collective dream that we are all plugged into and contributing to. And it's almost like when we go to sleep and we have our own nightly dreams, it's like we kind of unplug from the collective dream to kind of go offline, I guess you could say, go offline and play our own video game offline on our own personal computer that's not synchronized to the network, so to speak. You know?
It's fascinating. I mean, I've had cities that I visit occasionally in my dreams throughout my life that you'll forget
Hmm.
about. Then you'll have a dream again, and I will see the same streets with, the same people, the same feelings, maybe being
Hmm.
lost or small, and then go back and wait a minute. I forgot about that city I dreamed about 30 years ago. And then,
Yeah.
occasionally every 5 or 6 years, I'm back there getting
Mhm.
some sort of an experience, which only recently, now that I've become, let's say, more conscious of my own energy, I can bring back with me and use that experience in this life, which is something I wanted to touch base upon. It's like, I don't think sleep is a waste of time the way a lot of people think, just to regenerate, physical
Hmm.
stresses. Probably there's a
Right.
lot more there for most people than they're aware of or have accessed yet.
Yeah, exactly. And, dreams are a multifunction thing. So on the very lowest level, sure, it might be for memory consolidation, just like neuroscience believes, where things that you kind of picked up throughout the day before, the week before, that are little memories, little sensations that you didn't fully file away in your memories, they're kind of loosely floating around. They get defragmented and kind of reintegrated back into your consciousness by being consciously experienced. So, that could be part of it, but that does not explain the meaningful, sometimes very elegant symbols that are and narratives that are involved in dreams that teach us higher lessons or teach us more about who we are, our life, how it's going to go, maybe what's coming up the next couple days that we should be aware of. So that gets into more like precognition, like precognitive dreams.
Hmm.
I mean, I've had dreams. I love citing this example where one time I dreamt of just like a comb. I was looking at a comb that had very sharp like teeth on it, like very sharp edges on its teeth. And all of a sudden, I wake up because the phone's ringing, and I stumble over to like answer the phone, and it's a wrong number saying, "Hey, hello, is this Edgecomb's Auto?" Edge comb, and I was dreaming about the edge of a comb, just like
Interesting.
30 seconds before. How does that work? I mean, that's not coincidence. That's clearly something from the future or feeding back into the past or some sort of precognitive thing. And I think why that happened is because when I was asleep, I was not synchronized with linear time fully, with the collective, reality, the collective waking reality. And so I was kind of a little bit loosey-goosey within linear time and therefore maybe bleeding a little bit into the future, and the future's kind of bleeding a little bit into the past. And therefore it bled into my dream from the surrounding space-time continuum, a little bit from the future, a little bit from the past. And I had that dream experience. Um, and then I've had many other cases of dreams being prophetic or precognitive in some way, and enough so where you can, if you're good at that, you can reliably use them to predict what's going to be coming up in the next couple days, and therefore be more cautious of what's going to be happening. Okay. But what all that goes to show then is that, yeah, dreams are like waking reality. But as I said, where it takes place mostly offline, but only very loosely, maybe at a very deep lower level, still connected to the collective. And therefore you're not really rooted in linear time. And so therefore things from the future can bleed into your dream just through what we would call precognition or some kind of psychic ability. But um, yeah, so it's interesting what dreams are capable of, and it's not just memory consolidation.
I've asked my dreams to help me with challenges or problems I haven't been able to figure out in my life, and I've come up with solutions.
Hmm.
Like when I consciously go to bed and I say, "Okay, can't figure this out. Give me some ideas. Maybe help me through something or other in my
Yeah.
life that I may be stuck on or I don't have an answer to." I will get often enough, some answers through the dream, and I'll wake up, write them down, and
Hmm.
put them into play. And it seems, it's a tool a lot of people miss, is to ask that part of themselves maybe for some help if they're stuck somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah, you can totally do that. And even historically, there have been some famous examples of scientists or inventors who, through dreams, were able to come up with their invention. I forgot the guy's name, some chemist who wanted to figure out the chemical structure of benzene. It's a component of gasoline, essentially. And he couldn't know, and then he had a dream of a snake biting its own tail, the Ouroboros, and he realized that the chemical structure was a ring, like a
Hmm,
snake biting his own tail. That's one
interesting.
example. Another example was a guy who invented the sewing machine. He didn't know how to get the thread to be working with the needle in order to sew along a piece of cloth. And then he had a dream of if I remember this correctly, a bushman holding a spear, and the tip of the spear had a hole in it. And then when he woke up, he realized, wait a minute, that's what I need. So you put the string through the hole, and then the little hook latches it, and pulls it back, and as it goes up and down, it kind of moves it along. And
Interesting.
so yeah, and so those two examples, the sewing machine and the chemical structure of benzene, if you think about it, how much that has changed modern life to have, no longer just hand sewing, but actual machine to sew things. I mean, that revolutionized a lot of things. And so human history, it's funny how much they have been influenced, or it has been influenced by nightly dreams, not to mention other things like psychic nudging by non-human entities, or perhaps innate knowledge that someone incarnated with to give to humanity and eventually came out in the form of some sort of intuition or insight or something like that. So much of what happens, as I mentioned earlier, in the phenomenal world of the five senses is it owes its origins to the non-physical, perhaps even to the non-human. And it's kind of like that Shakespeare quote that all the world is a stage. You know, it is like this is like a stage production being played out, and all the things that truly matter are happening behind the curtain and underneath the stage. They're kind of directing the story, the narratives of both our personal lives and also humanity at large. And speaking of personal lives, it's not just dreams that give us guidance, but sometimes we will have synchronicities or serendipitous opportunities that come our way, right? Or times where you're facing certain ruin in life,
Hmm.
and then something swoops in at that last minute to kind of bail you out of it. And it could be a like some random settlement check from a class action lawsuit that arrives in the mail, and the amount happens to be almost exactly what you need for a critical car repair, or things like that. These things happen, and for certain people, they happen often enough that it's not just coincidence. And so you do realize that, yeah, this is almost like a movie production in a way, where there are stage hands and a director, would be your higher self, your spirit, that's kind of nudging things. We still have to play our roles. We still have to perpetuate the narrative. But there are things that are beyond the field of view of the camera of, individualized consciousness that is sort of directing the action on the stage itself.
Well, let's talk about time with that, in focus.
Mhm.
What would you feel? I've heard a quote not so long ago that time is simply a thought from God.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good way of putting it. Because in our personal nightly dreams, a lot of times time doesn't flow at the same rate that it does
At all.
in the waking, right? I mean, someone can have a dream where they're literally experiencing 2 hours worth of content, but it happens between like the 10-minute intervals of their snooze alarm, you know? So 2 hours crammed into 10 minutes, that's pretty crazy, which is interesting because in the alien abduction field, sometimes people are taken into these ships and they experience, 8, maybe 12 hours worth of time on there, but then they're returned and only 1 or 2 hours has passed back home. So it's a different time rate. Are they just using physics, or are they using some knowledge of reality being conscious at the root? Maybe they're manipulating it consciously and not just technologically, right?
I've had
So,
full life dreams at night before, right? Where I've had dreams from being young to being
yeah.
old and it felt like an entire life passed it, but it's just been one night of a different
Hmm.
sort of, that wasn't me. It was very, very fascinating to see how time is very, perspective related, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And time, I mean, a lot of our sensation of time really depends on memory. Because if we
Mm.
didn't have memory, then we wouldn't have a scale of time to associate with it, right? So a lot of it does depend on memory. And kind of going back to what you said earlier about being in a dream and revisiting a town or a city or a place that you dreamt about many years earlier, but in the dream, it feels familiar. It's like, oh yeah, of
Right.
course I know that place, but it's a place that only exists in the dream state. Something that's sort of creepily related to that is where in a dream, you have a memory of something, and you can remember it like, oh yeah, of course, this is how it's been for the past week or month or years or whatever. But then when you wake up, you realize, no, that never actually happened, and I never even dreamed about it.
Mm.
So the memory itself was dreamt up in that moment, but the memory depicted a very long time span or something that happened years or months earlier in the dream. In other words, sometimes it's possible for the past to be dreamt up in the present. That you never actually went through it. It's more like the past got, you know, invented in that spot. And so, what if some of our own personal waking memories are like that too, where we think, oh yeah, of course, this is what happened last year during that particular month. But what if that's not the case? What if that was something that changed or, got invented in the moment, and now we and everyone else along with us thinks that that's, what the reality is. And of course, that gets into the Mandela effect and people disagreeing over whether it's Bernstein Bears or Bernstein Bears. I don't know if you guys ever talked about that on your
I've had
podcast.
two experiences which I know have changed in my life because I remember having conversations with people. One
Hmm.
was the Volkswagen logo. I know I asked a friend why they were touching. The V and the W used to touch. That's one of the Mandela effects, and now they're separate. And I
Hmm.
know for a fact I looked at a car and I was talking to a friend. This is
Hmm.
my memory anyways. And I said, well, because he's German, strangely enough. And so I said, well, what does that logo mean? And he goes, oh no, that's Volkswagen. They just put it that way together as a logo. And also the cornucopia of the Fruit of the Loom
Yeah.
underwear. I know it was
Hmm.
there. I asked my mom what it was when I was a little boy because she didn't have a lot of money. Used to buy me $5, whatever the cheap underwears that or the tidy whities or whatever they want to call them. And I remember looking at that cornucopia symbol and saying, "What's that?" And my mom told me, and then now suddenly it's not there anymore. So I don't
Hmm.
know whether it's your explanation or the fact we're living in a dream or the fact I've switched dreams or faulty memory. Could be any of those, but it still
Yeah.
kind of goes along with what you've just said, which is still, showing you things aren't as linear as we have been taught they need to be.
Yeah, exactly. And quantum physics says the exact same thing, which is that, so in quantum physics, the basic idea is that at the subatomic level, things exist in a nebulous state of different possibilities that are superimposed. And so they're not definitive, they're not defined until you interact with it in some way. Or, yeah, I mean, until you, a conscious being, interacts with it. And that's what turns it from a buffet of different possibilities into just one single dish. To use a astrologically, I'm a Taurus, so sometimes I use food metaphors.
Good
Anyway,
metaphor. Maybe
yeah,
it
yeah.
allows
So,
people to see, how to be free. A lot of people have asked me in all the videos I've done, like I'm stuck in this job, I'm stuck in this relationship, I'm stuck in
mhm,
this country, I'm stuck with a sickness, that sort of thing. Maybe to
yeah.
realize, there's options that can be accessed. I'm not sure what they would have to do to access them, but I've certainly seen that potential of, things not being so cut and dry. Like you said, it's
Yeah,
go to the buffet,
right.
depends what you eat.
And the important thing to take away from quantum physics and from this, past being kind of fluid idea, which is that sometimes it's not so much that the past changes, it's more that there are areas of the past that have not yet been observed or interacted with or known to you. So they're blank spots that can still be written in. It's like Mad Libs. There's still blanks in your past that can be written in that then become reality in your present and therefore affect your future. And so earlier I mentioned the example of needing a critical car repair, and then you get that check in the mail just at the exact perfect timing with the exact perfect amount to pay for it. Well, when that happens, it's possible that your car repair, that mechanical issue, like a flat tire or something like that, only happened the day before, but the check was mailed a week before.
Mm,
You see, so the thing that you need right now in the present to deal with something that happened yesterday, it actually originated in the past a week earlier. Uh, but the thing is, you didn't know necessarily that there was a check on the way. That was a blank area of the past that you never verified whether there was or wasn't. And
mm,
so it was still up in the air. In a quantum sense, it would have still been in a state of superposition, between one timeline where, yeah, there was a check, another one where it was like double the amount, another one where it's only half the amount. But it's possible that sometimes the blank or nebulous areas of the past can be selected by either your subconscious or your higher self or something like that, where it can select that to help you out in the present moment. So it's not really changing the past, it's more like selecting a new part of the past. uh and so, yeah, so that can happen sometimes. And so if you're in a bind and you need like a lot of help, more so than you can muster just through physical action, yeah, it helps to pray or to meditate or to visualize or immerse yourself in that probable future where everything just works out so you can kind of evoke those positive emotions that are associated with that. Because in my experience and in the experience of many others, and there have been so many books that have been written on this principle of how to manifest things. Well, so much of it depends on you resonating with that end state, like who you would be in that particular
mm,
probable future where things worked out. The
mm,
happiness, the relief, the gratitude, the joy, the optimism, like life is good again. That sort of feeling. If you can resonate that right now in the present moment, then on a quantum level, what I think is happening is that you're sort of vibrating your soul, and the soul isn't fully locked into linear time, so part of it extends throughout time, both forwards and backwards and sideways. And any probable future that matches that vibration gets like locked onto, and you start entering into a kind of like a feedback loop with it, and it becomes more energized, and then its probability of manifesting goes way, way, way up. And so that's how you start attracting that probable future where you feel as you visualize yourself feeling. See,
Uh,
so you're just making a connection between your present and the future. And if that particular connection requires that some part of your past gets selected in order to make it happen, then so be it. The past can change, or the past can be selected to reinforce that entire future, present, past, new connection, this new pathway.
I mean, recall reading somewhere, I'm not sure about, like a high happy vibration has more of an up and down vibration, whereas the fear vibration has more of a straight line, like a lower vibration. And so a happy one touches more points of reality, like you said. So maybe that is
Yeah,
how people can, so it gives you more options, so to speak.
right. And
Yeah.
and going back to the dream analogy, if you're in a dream and you suddenly I don't know, inducing yourself a very positive emotion, you'll start noticing the dream changing to
Mm.
reinforce that. Maybe the sun will come out between the clouds and there's a rainbow appears and birds start flying around and everything's like super happy. Well, in a dream it happens within seconds, but in waking life it might take a week or two or 3 weeks sometimes, but it happens. So once again, there's a correlation between waking reality and dreams, at least in that sense. And conversely, if you're in a dream and you start suddenly get like a creepy feeling, you get kind of scared and fearful, then the dream will change to reflect that, and it can turn into a nightmare. And likewise, in the waking world, if you start focusing way too much on cynicism and depression and worthlessness, self-loathing and hatred of others and hatred of your life and the whole thing that runs away from you, at some point that energy is going to coalesce so much that you're going to start attracting it like a magnet into your life. You're going to start attracting events, people, uh, accidents, illnesses, injuries that produce in you those same feelings that you were harboring. And that's like the negative flip side version of what I mentioned like a minute ago about invoking positive emotions and feelings to resonate with a probable future that has more of the same. So the fundamental rule behind these two things is that like begets like.
Hmm.
So if you invoke in yourself a feeling of gratitude, then you're going to actually start attracting probable futures where you feel more gratitude, which can only happen if things are working out. See, that's why some people love focusing on gratitude because it's a very powerful means of I don't know if it's gaming or tricking the system or if it's actually just genuinely using your God-given powers to kind of affect the collective dream and then the waking world. But it works. It works.
Does. I think you've got to be there 100% though. I think you can't game maybe reality. If you only 99% are grateful and secretly you want
Hmm.
something, I think you end up trying to trick yourself and it doesn't seem to come into play. I've been there in my life before going, I
Yeah.
need it, I need it, I need it, and then you never get
Mhm.
it. Whereas now when you just forget about it, often enough, as you've mentioned, something new will be selected for you that you never knew you always wanted.
Exactly. Yeah, you do have to forget about it because it's once again quantum physics. In quantum physics, if you are observing something, it's frozen in place. It's like a single possibility. If you want to take advantage of quantum fluidity with time being able to shift a little bit and different probable futures coming towards you, you have to put it out of your mind so that you're not constantly focusing on that possibility. Like, so you might focus on it initially for a certain session, certain while, like during a prayer or a meditation or visualization. And that helps kind of put a lasso around it in the future that kind of selects like, yeah, you are the future that I kind of resonate with. But after that, you can't just keep staring at it because then you're always like,
Mhm. Yeah,
uh, it's like you're always like holding it out in front of you and it's never going to come towards you. So you have to forget about it. And then that loosens it up, it becomes more quantum fluid and then it starts drifting towards you into your life.
I would agree 100%. Going
Yeah.
back to dreams, something maybe we can touch base upon. What would you say about the monsters that invade people's dreams? Some people have
Mm,
had, fifth dimension. I've had some horrible nightmares of energetic draining
yeah.
circumstances that I've had to face and things like that. Have you had those experiences?
Mhm.
What
Yeah. I think anyone who isn't lucid, like constantly lucid in their dreams is subject to energy feeding and interference by entities that come around during the night. Because I mean, you're pretty much a sitting duck when you're asleep at night. You're in your bed, you're relatively unconscious or at least not lucid. You kind of go along with whatever happens in the dream. So it's really no trouble for a discarnate entity or some sort of astral parasite to come around, hover over you, jack into your aura, like your subtle energy field in your brain. Actually, it's not even in your brain because during sleep you're slightly detached from the physical body. So, but they're jacking into your subtle energy body and can manipulate your dream through that. And they can also, and I'm talking here experientially and empirically. This is not just theory. This is based on people's actual experiences of what, including psychic people who were able to stay conscious as they went to sleep and therefore be able to observe and scan the entities that come around and why they're doing it and what exactly they're doing. All right.
Really?
So yeah, so when they jack into a person's mind, they can also scan that person's history or that person's subconscious emotional trigger points, and then they can use those trigger points to engineer the dream itself in order to extract the maximum amount of frustration or hatred or fear, terror, or whatever, So or maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's more that all they have to do is simply stimulate that part of the soul, and the dream auto-generates to generate that. It's kind of like in neurosurgery where they poke a part of the brain and the person smells strawberries or starts to giggle or feels the presence of, some non-physical being. Um, Probably the similar thing is going on when these entities jack into a person. I think they're able to stimulate the etheric brain, I guess you could call it, in certain ways in order to induce certain dreams, either automatically or directly to feed on a person. So that does happen quite a bit, more so to kids than adults. I mean, it's different when you're a kid because your your aura isn't as well, first of all, your spirit and your higher consciousness isn't as embodied in the physical body when you're only 2, 3, 4 years old. It's not rooted in there yet because the body, the brain doesn't have it hasn't developed yet certain anatomy that is required for the full interface and function with uh, the higher part of your being, I guess you could say. And so kids have less of a spiritual immune system, and they also have a lot more life force energy because it hasn't been drained or beaten out of them yet in life through school and work and so on. And so they're like, these plump grapes that are being sucked on by these entities that come around, and that's why kids tend to have a lot of nightmares and see things that are around. I mean, God knows I had my share of it as a kid. I mean, I slept with the lights on with my back against the wall.
Really? I had the first night I was in a new house, so I moved when we were in kindergarten. You know the house well, my parents are still there. I was
Mhm.
taken into the wall. I remember having a dream, huge guy in overalls on a tricycle. I still remember kind of a like a mountain looking man shape, but I wouldn't sleep with my I had the opposite. I still won't sleep with my back to a wall. Even to this day, after I had that experience of literally something coming with its hairy arm and taking me into the wall and
Wow,
having yeah.
that's
So I
scary.
see what you mean. Yeah, when I was literally in kindergarten. Interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, not to mention that as kids, our brain waves are different from when we're adults. So when we're adults, most of our brain waves tend to be in the high alpha brainwave state or the high beta state. But when you're like before age 6, you're mostly in theta,
Hmm.
and if not alpha, and then even earlier, more in the delta wave state when you're like an infant. And the thing about theta is that when meditators or people go into the theta state, that's when they start getting more visions and visuals, and they can see ghosts and paranormal phenomena. A lot of times, that particular brainwave state is associated with being able to perceive beyond the five senses. So to me, it's no surprise, again, that kids that are in that age range can oftentimes see and experience things that we as adults cannot because their brains are literally in that other state that we would be in, when we go to sleep or meditate or something like that, where we can start picking up on these extrasensory phenomena.
I often wonder what children are screaming about that the parents can't understand. I don't know why Billy is screaming, but perhaps you're seeing something the parents aren't in this reality.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my first word as a baby was ghost. I mean, it was
Really?
Geist because I was German, so that was my first word. Even like it was
Wow.
like a month. It was like months before I could say mama or papa, but I knew that word because when
Wow.
you're panicked, when you're panicked, trust me, a baby can can say a word. Yeah,
Whoa. That's pretty fascinating, actually. That so maybe we were both born into the kind of system that we asked to be so that we could come into the men that we've become to study and share and to maybe help other people through these sorts of ideas.
definitely, definitely. Because as I mentioned earlier, so much of what we face in life is a gamble. Gamble meaning that there is a potential payoff, but also a potential risk. So being subjected to these kinds of forces and entities, there is an upside to it, but only if we only if we overcome it, only if we master it.
Well, let's talk then a bit about the recapitulation, if you don't mind. As Castaneda put it, like I've been through my own, I've done a full,
Hmm.
regression on a personal level. Some people call it, birth regression or past life integration. And I found it helpful in that it's helped me to understand my life from, where you don't make the same mistake over and over again, so
Yeah.
that the next time I'm faced with a similar pattern, mostly, not always, you get the opportunity or you take a different road. Have you had that experience?
Yeah, I've done recapitulation as well. Probably not as much as you have, because it sounds like you've been quite thorough with it. Uh, part of my issue is that I'm so future oriented that it's hard for me to think about my past, especially the more traumatic and challenging aspects of it. Because just, I mean, when you do that, there's no there's no good feelings that come from it. It's a lot of pain. But I mean, that's exactly the reason why you have to do it. It's just like when you got some sort of a muscle injury, sometimes you just have to massage it to get the to work it loose, even if it hurts. That's part of physical therapy. So soul therapy is what you're talking about. You're talking about doing recapitulation to kind of massage out a lot of the kinks, a lot of the scars that are in the soul that have accumulated through a lifetime of pain and trauma, and including self-injury, like the self-hateful thoughts that we have in life due to external alienation or rejection or not meeting our goals or thinking that we're not good enough. All those things, they do scar us, and they're down there right now, even right now, manipulating our everyday choices, biasing our worldview. Uh, and the sooner you deal with them, the sooner you kind of clear that out so that going forward in life, you can be more free, right? Yeah, so I've done that, and I've also researched quite a bit about recapitulation and how it works. And it's interesting that there are different sources that kind of talk about it from different angles. Like you mentioned the Castaneda angle, okay? So that's one. And you've got others that are related to that, like Teun Mares.
Hmm.
He was also a Toltec teacher.
I
Okay,
read
and he's
all of
got
his
his
books
own.
as well. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, good. So you know
yeah.
what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
And see, I like him a lot because he's like Castaneda without a lot of the frivolous, semi-fictional stuff around it. He's just like straight to the point. You know, here's how to be a warrior. Here are the different ways to go about
The male and
dealing with.
female books of his were fascinating. I highly recommend those for people. How to be a strong
Mhm.
male, how to be a strong female. They were very, very, very well thought out, very well presented books, Theo Maris. Like, what was his take on recapitulation? Do you recall? How was it different from?
It was actually pretty similar. It was actually pretty similar. It was part of the thing, although actually part of his books involve what he himself discovered through his own recapitulation of his past lives, of his mission for coming here from another world, I guess you could say, and the events that led to it. So yeah, but it's similar. I mean, just the idea that I mean, who else did I read? I think his name was Victor Sanchez. He had a book on recapitulation,
I met him
and
once. He came to
you did.
Las Santinienes de
Wow.
Don. Yeah, yeah. I met him. I was sitting up front. It was very, very interesting. We went into a show to see him coming to chat, and he said he was holding his hands down by his will, his center, and he was
Mhm.
speaking English the best that he could. I had front row seats, and I remember him saying very clearly that he doesn't speak English. He was pulling the English out of the ether, the intent, and putting
Mm.
it together just to be able to share with people, in that moment. And it was
Wow.
fascinating chat to watch him, kind of gather his sources. It's one of my first experiences with someone maybe pulling something out of the collective
Mhm.
that they didn't have at the time. And
Wow.
yeah, his sharing of his experiences of recapitulation and the challenges he had and things like that was an amazing couple hours spent
Hmm.
there.
That's amazing. That's cool. You met him. Like, wow. Yeah, it's really neat. So,
Well, he was giving a chat and he was talking about the recapitulation. And basically, someone was saying, is it okay maybe if I keep reliving my experiences, eventually, maybe I'll figure it out. And someone made a joke on death at the time, and he was the only one who laughed, which is really
mhm.
funny. So you kind of got to see the warrior in him when he understood that, death kind of gives people a bit of the seasoning. Maybe a thought of your death will get people over. Maybe I could suggest that over their challenges and realize you're not going to be here forever. You won't be Tom
Yeah.
forever. I won't be Lorenzo forever. So the next time our audience is faced with a challenge, consider that, maybe it's a good opportunity because you may not get another one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why during the Renaissance and that whole time period, there was a whole idea of memento mori, remember your death. They
Mm.
had they had statues and paintings and little trinkets to always remind them of death, of their mortality. And that induced in them a kind of sobriety that helped them deal with life better and to focus their priorities more on what actually mattered. Because, yeah, because people back then, especially during the Renaissance, they were they're definitely more dedicated to the higher things in life than we are nowadays. Nowadays you don't really think about death. You got the whole YOLO philosophy. You only live once, so might as well live it up. That whole idea, right? But yeah, I mean, the more you're conscious of death and what comes after, the more you put your own life in better and higher context, right? So you don't waste your time dealing with worrying about the little things that ultimately don't matter. Yeah. So just to finish up the recapitulation thing, another interesting source that I read on that is Rudolf Steiner.
Hmm.
He
Okay.
also mentioned well, he didn't call it recapitulation, but he did talk a lot about memory. He talked a lot about how memory works. And essentially what he said is that there are certain memories that we have that they only really get stored or occupied in the surface level of our minds. And so when you die and you reincarnate, those things don't really get transferred. I mean, they're written somewhere so you can access it through the Akashic, but it's not really written into your soul, right? But then there are other things that have so much meaning, that have been inscribed so deeply that now it's almost like been uploaded to the cloud. In other words, to your spirit, to your higher consciousness. So there it is within you in that higher state, almost like like a copy has been uploaded into that. And then in your next life, your next incarnation, it's more easily accessible at that point. So it comes up more easily. Uh, and that is exactly, in a way, what Castaneda talked about or was told by Don Juan, which is that when you do a recapitulation, I mean, you're not just trying to heal past traumas and get yourself straightened out. What you're also doing is you're creating a copy of your memories. You're creating a copy of your memories such that when you die and what they call the great eagle comes to eat your memories, your mind, your soul energy, it's only eating a copy of it. So then you still get to retain your ego identity or your spiritual identity, your memories and everything after death if you do recapitulation enough. See, that was the original Toltec purpose of recapitulation, to survive this taking or deletion of your hard drive, after death. So you're uploading something to the cloud so that it still exists. And then therefore after death you can continue on. And then gets into some other weirder aspects of occultism and esoteric practice where, you know, typically when a person dies, the first thing that happens, of course, is their physical body drops away. I mean, that's what death is. So now it's only their consciousness and their astral and etheric bodies that are now, in a packaged unit outside of the body. Okay. And then after about a period of 3 days to a week, this is all according to Rudolf Steiner and various other esoteric teachers. So after about a week, the etheric body starts to disintegrate. And at that point, you start losing touch with linear time, with this world, with the people that are here, and you start fading out into the astral planes, the astral environment, which is what we would call the afterlife or the spirit planes. Okay. So, but at that point, the further along you go with that process, the more you lose your human personality and a lot of its memories,
Hmm.
or at least easy access to those things. And then eventually, you're just a point of consciousness that goes through the higher realms to kind of contemplate your existence and then choose what part of yourself to project back into a human form to have another go at it. Okay. I mean, that's highly simplified form because there's many other things that happen in that process, right? But the reason why I mention that is because when it comes to recapitulation, it's possible that after death, you've recapitulated so much that you stay together as a bundle and you don't disintegrate after death. And so you are just as you were alive, but now just minus a physical body. Okay. So now you can be a person in the etheric state, like a ghost, I guess you could say. You could probably visit the astral planes if you want, but you still have all your memories, your identity, your life force energy, and so on. And at that point, you're free of the physical body, and but you're also not yet going through that death process of higher level contemplation and reincarnation, being born into a new human body. So, um, some souls find advantage in that, you know. And it's possible that if you're some esoteric initiate who's doing that process of recapitulation and building up your etheric body, and so you stay together after death, it's possible to become so good at that and so powerful in that afterlife state that you can materialize a physical form just using the power of your mind. Okay. So imagine that. Imagine you die, you're outside your body, but you're a spiritual master of sorts who can then materialize a new physical body just directly using the power of your mind and your imagination. And now you can actually be walking amongst living humans in a physical body, interacting with them physically, but you're actually dead. You're actually a dead human who's psychically projecting a physical form. I mean, that is weird, but I've seen supposed cases of that. And actually, Castaneda, in which book was it? Was it The Active Side of Infinity, I think? Was one of those. But yeah, he talked about how some of these ancient and even some of the modern Toltec shamans, they were capable of achieving this deathless state where now they were like shapeshifters essentially because they could use the power of their mind to manifest, different physical forms that they wanted, right? And they could be this old or that young or whatever, and they had this power. So the only reason I bring that up is to show what is possible within the rules and the mechanics of the soul and the etheric body and the astral life, and that not every human being is fated to go through the typical process of death and then losing your etheric body and then your astral body and then reincarnating and so on and so forth. It's possible to kind of go around that process and maintain your form and then perhaps even materialize a physical body directly to continue existing here, almost as like a dead yet immortal kind of being.
It takes us back, I think, even full circle to the first hour of our chat where you said, what gets taught in school and what gets encouraged in young people. And if this was something that, was told to me when I was 5 or 6, the potential of what's possible with your life, like the real gold or the
Mhm.
goals you can be after instead of, collecting money or collecting girlfriends or collecting fast cars or what have you, that you get taught within this so that you could collect your energy, so to speak, to a higher level, and then you could adventure forever. Seems to me like a worthwhile goal in this life, to put yourself together and then to see what's out there or to see what's, beyond what's, we didn't really touch base on purgatory. I know you mentioned it as one of the possible topics
Mhm.
for today, before we got on, but, perhaps that's what this place is, just a place to circle around till your energy gets good and strong. And then, who knows what the next adventure could bring.
Yeah, right. I mean, life does have a kind of purgatorial function to it in the sense that the choices that we are faced with, they are ultimately moral choices that they have spiritual implications. It's almost as if we are being watched and judged by something, you know. And there's one, okay, so there's this one part of existence which is merely the energy farm, merely the spiritual prison and matrix control system and all that. But then there's another part which, as I mentioned earlier, is more like a spiritual school or a gym or a playground. Okay. And a school or a gym, it's all about results. Okay, it's all about progress. I mean, why do you even go to the gym? I mean, other than to get more healthy or build bigger muscles or lose fat or whatever. Okay. So same thing on a spiritual level. These choices and these challenges that we go through in life, they are for something. They are for something. And there are metrics, there are measurements that indicate progress along those lines. And those are improvements in your moral, spiritual purity, integrity, strength, growth, how sentient you are, how sharp you are. Those are the things that we seem to be evaluated on. And it's when we violate those and go against them that we get things like karma, whatever karma actually is. Because I mean, I know there's a lot of BS superstitious concepts surrounding karma, but there is something like karma that does exist. It's probably a combination of just pure cause and effect on an etheric and astral level, and it's also self-induced consequences through a guilt that takes place at a higher, deeper, subconscious, spiritual level. Because even okay, like let's say you're a human being and you've been programmed by society to not be a nice person, something like that, all right? When you're not nice to someone at the ego intellectual level, you might not care. You might think like they deserve it or people are crap and whatever, okay? Or all women are this or that, like some of these misogynistic men or vice versa, right? So that could happen, but even though at the intellectual level you don't feel the guilt, there is a part of you that feels it.
Oh yeah.
See? There's a part of you that feels it. Even if you deny it, it is
Mm.
there. And after death, especially after death, uh, some of that programming falls away because I mean, it's part of our biological programming,
Mm.
and biological programming can't really continue when there is no biology because you're not even in your physical body anymore, right? So, a lot of those armoring, to use a Wilhelm Reich term, a lot of these armorings that we have around us that shield us from our true empathy and our true aspects, if that drops away after death, then you're left staring at the true consequences of what you've done, and you feel it so very deeply, and you can't avoid it. You can't avoid it. And so when that happens, you can feel such guilt and have such deep understanding and perspective of what you did that that then leads to self-elected correction mechanisms, which then we would perceive as karma in the life afterwards. So, it's not necessarily that there are it's this panel of gods that is punishing us, punishing us based on our actions. It's our own higher objective morality that comes fully to the fore. Just like during nighttime, that's when we see the moon and the stars, because the sun is gone. Well, same thing when we die, once the noise of the physical brain of the body is gone, that stuff comes out, and we have no choice but to fully feel the consequences and the weight of what we've done. And that kind of figures into what we choose for ourselves in our next life. I mean, choose for ourselves in the next life, assuming we are sophisticated enough to have that choice, right? Because if we're just, as I mentioned earlier, these really young souls that have very basic needs, then we're not going to have the ability or the care or the knowledge or the wisdom to decide for ourselves. A lot of times, then it would be decided for us. Like it's just, cast of the dice.
I think it's a beautiful way to put it, though. It shows you there are no victims. Like even the Toltecs talked about that in this world. If you come back in a harsh environment or circumstances, maybe exactly what you've just said is what went on. And so you've put yourself there from a previous life so that you can, maybe not be so mean this time around, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah, right. And I think that speaks to the school or the gym aspect of it, right? But again, the school, the gym, the university, that's again only half of the equation because the flip side is yes, there is the law of the jungle, the energy farm, and so on. And that part does have gamble, risk, potential damage, potential actual free will violations. So, I believe in karma. I believe in the higher laws and everything we just talked about. Uh, but at the same time, I do believe that free will violations can happen, accidents can happen, but that's not all the world is, right? So the people that want to say the world is just dog eat dog, is just the law of the jungle, they're wrong in saying that it's only that. And I think on the flip side, perhaps the other viewpoint, which is that it's none of that, it's always everything always has a reason and a purpose. Maybe that's not also 100% correct either. Maybe it's something in between where for the most part there is an order, there is a rhyme and a reason, but there's also fuzzy edges to that where, yeah, you know what, there can be free will violations, there can be accidents sometimes, and to make up for it, that's where you get the concept of positive karma, where, okay, you know what? Things didn't go right. You got a bad meal, so now we're going to give you a rain check to get a free meal next time. Something like that, right? Where you've got a bad life one time because it went little past what was needed for your growth, for your soul evolution. So we're going to give you some store credit, and you get to spend it on the next life, just to put it figuratively. And that's something that that's something that Rudolf Steiner actually emphasized, which is that yes, karma is real, and people that are suffering sometimes, or actually a lot of times, probably it is their own self-elected misery in a way, but that doesn't mean it always is, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't help them because if you help someone uh, if you help the right part of them, you're helping them get out ahead of something that would otherwise be possibly even just be too difficult for them to even deal with. So I'm just saying that there are teachers, there are sources out there that get into these topics in very nuanced ways.
I would
Okay.
agree. I think there's nothing but help for people out there that, need it and nothing but ways you can help your fellow man if that's what you want to do and fellow woman. Simply
Hmm.
because, like you said, we're all in this together in some ways. So
Right.
you help someone else up, you get helped up. If you push someone down, probably you go down with them. Seems to me what's happened in my life, anyways. I can only talk from my own personal experiences.
Hmm. Yeah. So, and someone might ask, okay, well, what about psychopathic politicians who get away with so many crimes, or people that we know in our own lives? Like, yeah, not to get too personal, but people that I've known
Mm,
that have done some very bad things, and it seems like they get no comeuppance. But what I noticed about a lot of those souls, or maybe not even souls, is that they're not on a track of spiritual improvement and evolution.
right.
It doesn't matter to them, not even just intellectually, but also at a deep synchronistic soul destiny purpose. I mean, if you think about, let's say, a bear or a shark that eats an animal, or even eats a human or an alligator or something like that, does that animal get karma for doing that? And I would say no, because it isn't its natural function, natural design to be that. So it is actually doing exactly what it was meant to do,
Mm,
to be that way. And I think that does translate to certain types of humans who are not on a spiritual path, but more on a path of spiritual destruction of others, to be the challenges, the training dummies that we kind of spar with, right? I
Or you
think
said they could be non-humans too,
yeah, it
projecting
could
human
be
form. I've
right.
met a few of those, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, all that stuff. So what? So it seems to me, or it seems to a lot of people that okay, well then, what's the point? Because it seems that these psychopaths or these predators, they can do things without getting any sort of comeuppance. Like what? So they just have free reign. And I would say no, they don't actually have free reign, because if they don't have destiny, a higher self, higher forces helping them out in a positive way, they don't have that. Then they are more limited by certain metaphysical laws.
Mm.
So, for example, it may be the case that if you yourself are in a high enough vibration, I guess you could call it, like a high enough spiritual state, um, that these things cannot actually harm you. Because for them to try, they can't because there's nothing within you that gives them the credit, that
Mm.
gives them the credits they need to play that game in a way, you know. Whereas if you were to go up against someone who does have a spirit, who does have a true sentient soul, they would have the free will to potentially violate you, to violate your free will, but then they get karma for it, you see. Then they do get the comeuppance.
Never heard it put that way, but it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, yeah.
You make
And
your,
then the whole
yeah.
yeah, sorry. I mean, the whole concept of karma requires that there be some sort of violation or some sort of free will violation. So if you're someone who believes in karma, then karma is only because an imbalance was committed. So it shows that imbalances can be committed, but at least it shows that, yes, there are also corrective mechanisms behind that. So things do balance out in the end. It's just if you look at it from a too simplistic perspective, only then does everything seem completely unfair and hopeless and kind of dumb, right? But if you get that nuanced understanding, it makes perfect sense, and it just matches observations, to be honest.
I would agree 100%. I've watched that. I've had people give me that same argument. What about Bill Gates? Why isn't he in jail? And why are these people and
Yeah,
why are these monsters? And you go, there's a reason and a rhyme for everything. And it doesn't look like the kind of life I would want to live. When you look in their eyes, I've,
yeah.
I've, I've met politicians from Canada. I met an ex-prime minister at a Christmas party once, and I looked in his eyes, and there was just something
Hmm.
different going on there. Is the best way I could put it. I've never felt so much fear and a visceral fright
Yeah,
when I looked in his eyes once at a party and said, "Whoa, there's some people that aren't like me out there."
exactly. And if you are observant and you are intuitive, or you have even just the smidgen, just even a smidgen of psychic power to be able to read people, you'll start noticing that certain people aren't quite people as
Yeah,
we think of them, right? And so, yeah, I mean, Earth is it's like a masquerade ball. It's like we all look human, but the energy behind the eyes, the
yeah,
energy behind the eyes is very varied. It's very varied.
very, very varied. Well, I think we've come to a great full circle. I've got other topics I would definitely love to delve into one day. Should our timing align up down the road again in this infinite plenitude of now. Is there anything you'd love to leave our viewers with after this lovely second part of our amazing chat?
Oh, well, I mean, thanks so much for having me. And if you guys want to learn more about what I'm about and the kind of research I've done, just go to my website, montauk.net. I've got a ton of articles. I have free books. If you go to the book section, I've got just Fringe Knowledge for Beginners, Discerning Alien Disinformation, and a couple others. You can pick them up on Amazon if you want hard copies. But I've done a lot of work. I've been in this field since 1998. So almost 30 years. I've met a ton of people, and I'm just really trying to figure things out and put out a picture that helps people put their own puzzle pieces together. So check it out.
Definitely seem like a loving, humble man. So it's been a pleasure getting to spend a couple hours chatting with you. I will definitely leave the link to the website below. Please also email me that video you mentioned on scalar energy. I think our viewers would find that very interesting. And if
Sure.
anybody has any questions or suggestions or anything they'd like to maybe share with Tom on another chat or a message I can pass along or for him to me, please leave the notes below. We're delighted for all kinds of intelligent participations. Tom, thank you so much for being with us. I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Lie to my heart. No one tells me where I should start. Freedom first is what I say.